to Progressive Soup. My name is David Stevenson. I'll be tonight's host. With us, we have a very special guest, Valerie O'Rourke. We're going to be discussing every conservative group's favorite whipping boy. That's to say, MoveOn.org. Heard of MoveOn.org? If you're on Fox News, you've heard about it because you discuss it constantly. Valerie, before we start on MoveOn.org, tell me, who are you, where you been, and what brought you to where you are now? What's your history?
Well, I'm a social worker for the state of Connecticut, and I've been doing that for over 10 years. And after Wisconsin, I decided that I needed to become involved. And in fact, I felt that I had a moral obligation because I really didn't like the direction that the country was going in. So I decided to join a Move On Council, and then I realized that there wasn't a Move On Council in Greater Danbury. So I approached my regional organizer and asked about forming the council. And the reason I chose Danbury rather than New York, where I live, is because I have a lot of contacts in Connecticut, in Danbury, through my job. And I'm familiar with the social services there, and I really thought that Danbury needed a progressive group like Move On. I have an MSW from Fordham University, and I investigate elder abuse through my job, and also I work with people that have physical and brain injuries, physical disabilities and brain injuries.
What's the, so now you've been connected to MoveOn.org for a while. What's the structure there? I mean, who's in charge of this organization?
Well,
I mean, I hear the name George Soros constantly on Fox.
Well, George Soros gave some startup money, and I believe it was somewhere around $1 million in the very beginning. And just to let you know, Move On was started during the Clinton administration, and there were two people, Wes Boyd being one of them, and he wanted to move on from the ugliness that was going on in politics regarding Monica Lewinsky. And he really just wanted President Clinton to be sanctioned so he could move on and get to the topics of the day. So George Soros initially gave some money to Move On, but hasn't been involved with Move On for many, many years. And now Move On is a PAC fund, and they
Political Action Committee.
Political Action Committee. They collect very small donations. The average donation is $50. There's a very, very small paid staff of about 30 people. And
nationwide?
Yes, and most of the folks that are doing the work are actually volunteers.
As you are.
As I am. I don't get paid for what I do. And there are now 5.5 million members, last I heard.
That's a pretty sizable contingency.
Yes, it is. And we do actually have a lot of political clout. And we do a lot of educating to people. If people go on the MoveOn.org website, they will find out about a lot of the different causes that Move On is particularly concerned about. And there's many. We've actually, over the summer, formed the Contract for the American Dream.
Contract for the American Dream. That sounds like a pretty noble gesture, at least in terms of the choice of words. Tell us about it.
Well, what we did was we held picnics and house parties in all congressional districts in July. And we asked...
All 438?
Yes. And
wow,
what
435.
435 is correct. And what we did was we talked to people and we asked them, what's on your mind? What is bothering you the most? And then we, the council organizers, presented that to Move On. And then Move On came up with the Contract for the American Dream, which is basically 10 points. And what we're going to be doing is promoting only progressive candidates that support the contract for the American dream.
Now, what exactly is a progressive? People in my lifetime have called me a liberal, and now they seem to be calling me a progressive with a big sneer in their voice, some of them. And I have to ask them, well, would they rather consider themselves a regressive? What's a progressive in your own personal eyes?
Well, to me, a progressive is a person who wants to make changes for the betterment of the community and the American people. And I know that label can be a pejorative in a lot of circles. I don't look at it that way. I look at it as someone who's trying to make a difference and who's really on the right side. Being a progressive means that you care about people. You care about your country. You care about important things like jobs. And you care about the environment. You care about never-ending war. You don't want it anymore. And I think, in my circles, most people agree with this. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you cannot be pro-business and support progressive causes. And that's one of the myths that people have, is that Move On doesn't like business, and that is simply not true. Obviously, we need to have small businesses, large businesses. We need responsible corporations. But what's happening now is that we have multinational corporations that are not paying their fair share of taxes and that are actually sucking the money out of the economy, rather than bringing the money into their economy.
Well, we talk a lot about that on the show, particularly in terms of, as you mentioned, small businesses, of how small businesses reinvest the money locally. Small banks reinvest the money locally. Small businesses employ most of the people in America. I think they create 70% of the jobs in America as opposed to large corporations.
That's right.
So we do favor small businesses over multinational corporations who really don't employ that many people. And as we just learned a couple days ago, a multinational corporation like Bank of America is, again, cutting 30,000 jobs, which might be good for the bottom line, might be good for their stockholders, but is certainly not good for their employees or good for America in general.
That's right. And that's one of the reasons that I became involved with Move On, is that I see this profits above people, profits above all else. And we're forgetting the fact that we need to build strong communities, we need strong schools, and we need a strong middle class. We need to have people involved in their communities rather than being, being held to other standards. And I think what I mean by other standards is we have a situation where corporations run the country and the world, and they basically dictate to us what the issues are.
Yeah. Let's go back to this idea about progressive, because I'm still intrigued by how progressive has become, in many people's eyes, almost a you said pejorative, but I'm going to use I'm going to use regular guy's language, a dirty word. Progressive has become a dirty word to a lot of folks. When we talk about progressive causes, would it be fair for me to say that creating national parks, it's a progressive cause, which is, I think everybody in the country is happy that we have national parks? Would women getting the right to vote be considered a progressive cause? Because I think most people out there probably would agree with the fact that suffrage, getting women the right to vote, was a very positive thing in America's history. I know that back in the day of Lincoln, certainly the people that were abolitionists that wanted slavery ended probably would not have been averse at all to being called progressives, because they believed in taking America's basic foundations and improving on them. Progress, moving forward, making America a better place. Building bridges to the 21st century rather than, I guess some people talk like they want to build bridges to the 17th century. So,
in terms of the word progressive, I am proud to call myself a progressive, and I think that we are trying to do things that are in the best interest of the country, and I believe that this is the time that we need to really push forward with our agenda, because if we don't, we are going to be in a very bad situation very shortly, because you cannot have a country where you have 30% of the children in poverty and this permanent high unemployment rate and the money being sucked to the top of the economy, to the very wealthy folks, and children that don't have an opportunity to go to college unless they go into major debt. If they call these progressive causes, then I'm proud to be one. I don't look at it as a pejorative, and I don't know really where that comes from.
Well,
I think that if you look at the opposite end of the spectrum, you have a situation now where we have permanent war, we have the prison industrial complex, we have the war on drugs, which is incarcerating people unnecessarily.
Yeah, and libertarians are very fond of criticizing the war on drugs as being a war which is we've lost. That's the official libertarian stance, and I've not heard a libertarian say anything other than the fact that they feel like the war on drugs was a complete failure, because all it does is we ends up with a huge prison population under the auspices of, as you mentioned, corporate prisons, for-profit prisons, rather than prisons where we have state employees working there. We have contract workers who get paid very low wages, have very little training, and don't really do a very good job of anything other than incarcerating prisoners. And the prison population, of course, in America is a higher percentage of the population than in any other country in the world. America has more people in prison per capita than any other country in the world. America is not a country of criminals. America is a country of good, decent, honest people. And it seems very odd to me that you would have so many people incarcerated in a country as great as ours. Other than the fact that it's a for-profit system, and what's best for corporate prisons is more prisoners, more business.
That's right, and now we have the same thing with the war. That's one of the roles that Rumsfeld took on.
Donald Rumsfeld, yep.
Yes, was to make the war for profit. And now you have in Iraq, you have McDonald's, you have Blackwater, you have all these different companies that are just making tons of money, and so that's why it can be discouraging to think that we're going to be able to stop the war. I don't know how, because these systems are in place. We have these businesses that are counting on these contracts, and they're going to get them.
I'm glad you mentioned Blackwater, because Blackwater, which of course has changed its name since, because Blackwater became a very naughty word in our vocabulary. People hear Blackwater and they think, these are the folks that are ripping off America in Iraq. These are the folks that are delivering impure water to our troops. These are the folks that are serving not clean food to our troops, to our own troops. And of course, this is something that back in the old days, when you had an army, your army included people that provided food. It was soldiers feeding soldiers, not contract workers, who, by the way, make huge salaries compared to the troops. So the support system in Iraq, whether it be Blackwater or I forget the name that Blackwater segued into, you have folks that are making huge amounts of money that are serving troops which are making very minimal salaries as soldiers serving their country. That's because there's a for-profit motive involved with the... What are some of the demonstrations, or, well, I don't know if demonstrations is the right word, but what are some of the events that you've helped organize?
Well, as I mentioned, I started the council in February, and the first rally was to save the American dream.
Yep.
And since then, we've done several others. We've protested Bank of America. We had the dirty dozen of corporations that don't pay federal income tax. And
can you say those on television? Can you say those 12 dirty words?
I'm going to try to name...
or are they like George Carlin's 7 dirty words that you can't say on television?
I'm going to try to name them all.
Okay, go ahead, 12.
All right, I'll try.
Here's your quiz.
Here's my quiz. We have Wells Fargo.
Wells Fargo.
Bank of America.
Bank of America.
Google.
Google.
Federal Express.
FedEx.
Federal Express.
Probably some of them.
Boeing.
Boeing. Now these are corporations that don't pay taxes.
Corporations that don't pay taxes.
I think you're going to have to add in General Electric.
General Electric.
Who not only didn't pay taxes but got money back from the government, in spite of the fact that they make huge profits, and yet they coerce. I guess coerce is the right word. Money out of our government in reverse. We pay them rather than they pay their fair share of taxes. Okay, that's 6. What else do we have? We're getting pretty close to 12.
Yeah. Let's see. I said federal.
You got FedEx.
FedEx. Google.
Any oil companies?
Exxon was on there.
ExxonMobil, yep.
And I don't know if I can recall the last 2 off the top of my head.
Maybe Shell.
No, Shell was not on there.
Yay! Shell paid a few dollars in tax at least. Thank you, Shell. Wonder how they nailed them for some tax dollars, or maybe they just slipped up their accounting department. So at any rate, you've got 12.
BP was on there.
British Petroleum, but what used to be called British Petroleum.
Yes.
Until it became multinational.
And one more.
Okay, so we know that there are 12, and we got through most of them. That's pretty good, because compared.
That was a while ago, but I do have my list.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. If I asked somebody else to come on the show and tell me who to name 12 senators, 9 times out of 10, I'd get 2 or 3. So that's pretty good. I give you a lot of credit for that. What other informational? I don't think of them as being demonstrations or I like to use the word informational seminars, because I was there when we were in front of Bank of America, and I was there when we were in front of Chase, and we were handing out information to people coming by, much to the chagrin of the bank employees. How did those go? What type of response did we get when we provide people with information about the banks that they're going to? What is our objective in speaking to people who are going to Bank of America to do their banking, or to Chase to do their banking? What's our point in doing that?
Well, what we want to do is raise awareness as to what these banks do for the community. And what happens is the banks suck money out of the community, and it goes up to the top. And very often the employees are paid very little, and some of them are on SNAP benefits, used to be called food stamps, or they require medical assistance through the state. So there's a price to be paid for having the employees paid so poorly. And
so it does. If it doesn't cost, let's use Chase as an example. If Chase pays their employees locally poorly, then if Chase doesn't give them enough money to live off of for a subsistence wage, then who do they come to for their health care? Who do they come to for their missing food? Who do they come to make up the difference when they can't afford to live in the area? They come to us.
Right, they come to the social services, and we do have a lot of people are not aware that people that are on state assistance are working, and they just are not making enough. Incidentally, that's one of the points for the contract for the American Dream, is a fair wage. We have in Europe, they have a much higher minimum wage than we do here. You cannot live on a minimum wage.
And how in the heck does the European countries survive while they're paying employees a living wage? How do companies survive there? Are they always going out of business because they have to pay their employees so much? How do they manage? Why can't companies pay Americans a living wage when they seem to be able to pay Europeans a living wage?
Well, that's a good question. And I believe that historically the labor movement has been disempowered. And I believe that started with Reagan firing the air traffic controllers.
PATCO, yep. Mm-hmm.
So basically, the American workers have no say. And we're basically being squished. There's so many people now going for jobs that we don't have the political clout that we once did. So I believe that people are suffering because of this. They're not able to make their bills, and they're taking on a tremendous amount of debt. And I believe that having a fair pay for a day's work is an important thing. I just wanted to mention briefly about some of the other points in the contract for the American Dream, because I think it's a really good document. And what we're going to be doing with this is trying to hold the politicians' feet to the fire, that this is what the American people are demanding. And we're changing the dialogue from we're going to cut the deficit and we're going to keep taxes low on the wealthy. And what we're looking to do is to for a fair tax structure.
A fair tax structure, okay.
Yes. We're looking for green jobs. Mm-hmm. We're looking for job growth. We need to address the unemployment issue.
Yep.
We're looking to end the wars and to invest at home. We're looking to preserve Medicare and Social Security. Okay,
I think these are all things probably that no matter where somebody is on the political spectrum, they probably would say, yeah, we're for that too.
Sure, and also restoring democracy. And that encompasses several things, such as using our redistributing the Citizens United, or overturning, I should say, Citizens United. And
Citizens United being the Supreme Court decision that made corporations people, or the equivalent of people, and unfettered campaign financing. Money is all flying all over the place now.
Right.
Now, one more thing that I wanted to talk about that I think is pretty pertinent and pretty important is a little event that's planned for this coming weekend and week, and perhaps even longer, down in a little spot in Manhattan that we lovingly know as Wall Street. Now, I know Move On is not directly involved in that, but I'm sure a lot of people that belong to Move On are also interested in being involved in and working with, because Wall Street, of course, is the financial center of the world, not just the United States, but of the world. And part of what people are complaining about in their concern about what's happening to the middle class is that, and you mentioned this, is that all the wealth in America is heading in this direction. It's all being sucked up. We all know that 2% of Americans own 50% of the wealth in this country.
But this, David, goes beyond that. Because what we've had is criminal activity that went on in order to get those funds funneled up to the top.
Yep.
And we've had dismantling of laws that were designed to protect people. I know you're familiar with Glass-Steagall. You spoke about it at one of our rallies.
Yep.
A very big mistake. To put the banks, to allow the banks and the investment banks, to operate together.
And to pretty much gamble with our money.
And so what I see is these are people that are ruthless, that they didn't care, and there was a lot of collusion with our government as well. And the whole action is about holding Wall Street accountable And in order to do that, people are going to be staying there. They're going to be staying there long after Saturday, the big day. And they want to show a solidarity with the people that have been affected by this, which is all of us. It's only the 1% that are taking this money and that have gotten away with these crimes. And we want to change that, and we want to empower other people to join us and to say this wasn't right. They need to give us our money back. They need to be held accountable. Some people need to go to jail, which I don't know if that's going to happen, but I do think that that's the case.
Well, so if the Tea, there's of course we talked on the shows about how there are actually two Tea Party groups. There's a Tea Party group that's libertarian in nature, and there's a Tea Party group that's top-down controlled by the right wing of the Republican Party, the corporate right wing of the Republican Party. And of course the Tea Party group that are more libertarians, those are the kind of folks that probably would like to be down there, and I would certainly invite them to come on down to Wall Street, because you understand that the problem that we're looking at in America now is a combination of big government and big business, and with a little smattering of right-wing religion thrown in for good measure, that are working together to head America in a very difficult position, and difficult direction. So, I guess the plan that we have is for people to come to Wall Street on Saturday and camp out and stay there. Now, you remember we've talked about on the show about how what they call the Arab Spring, where people in other countries, Egypt, right on down to Libya, and a lot of countries in between, filtered into high-profile places in their capitals and just basically said, "We're not leaving until you give us what we want, and what we want is to get our dictatorship out of here, to make our country more democratic." And that's basically the framework. That's the framework for Wall Street, for being on Wall Street, is to tell the folks in Wall Street that control our economy that we expect better things from them.
I agree, and we need to fight for it. I mean, this is probably the most important issue of our time.
Oh, we've run out of time. This has been Progressive Soup. David Stevenson, Valerie O'Rourke. We'll be back again soon. Thanks very much. Enjoy your evening.
All right, thank you.
See, she's telling me to look at camera one, and the camera 2 was the one that was on.
Oh.